Okay, so 609 BC, King Josiah dies. King Josiah, I'm going to rack your brain a little bit. What age was King Josiah when he became king? Anybody remember that one?
Wasn't he really young?
Yes.
Like 12 or something like that?
Close?
I thought it was 8.
Yes, 8 years old.
I remember he was young.
Yep, very good though. Okay, was he a good king or a bad king?
I thought he was a good king.
Yes.
But became...
Yes, excellent, Patty. Yes, he was a good king. He didn't go terrible though. But so that's when he dies in 609, and Babylon defeats Assyria. So remember, Assyria's way up here, and Babylon's down here, and Assyria is the country that took over northern Israel. Babylon is down here and comes later and takes over Assyria, okay? And so this is just more history. I find it kind of fascinating.
Northern Israel in that process?
Yeah, what, did I say something wrong?
No, you just said it got Assyria. I just wondered if it also got...
Yeah, because
Northern
Assyria
Israel.
already had taken. Yep, Assyria had
I was
already
just
taken
clarifying
over.
when you pointed out there. I was going, well, what did it get all
Yep, no,
about?
you're exactly right. Assyria had already taken over northern Israel, and they became exiles or prisoners, be a better way to put it. They became prisoners of Assyria, but now Babylon has become stronger, and they said, we're going to take over, and we want to become the king of the mountains. So they're defeating Assyria now in 609 BC. So in Ezekiel now comes along, and so if you want to turn to Ezekiel, and it says, in the 13th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day, while I was among the exiles or the prisoners by the Kabar River, the heavens were opened and I saw visions of God. On the 5th month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiachin. Okay, so let me just explain, because that just sounds like a lot of gibberish. Ezekiel was training to be a priest. He had been living in Jerusalem during the first Babylonian attack on the city. So the first Babylonian attack on the city was in 605 BC. This is when Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had been taken captive. Ezekiel was also. So what happened was Babylon, the king of Babylon, came and took the most choicest men, okay? Picked out the ones he thought were the smartest, the best looking, the most healthiest men, and took them in exile over to Babylon. So we have 3 dates. So that was when they came in 605, and then in 597, there was a second attack on Jerusalem. And then in 586, the city was destroyed. So I'm jumping ahead, but then all they did was leave the poor people. Okay, just left the poor people. That was all that was left. So now on to Ezekiel. So Ezekiel was training to be a priest, and but they had spared that city in that first wave of Israelite prisoners and hauled them off to exile. So the book begins 5 years after they were all taken. So Daniel and they're not really around each other, okay? So we don't see them interacting at all, okay? So next week we're going to be looking at Daniel. So we see Ezekiel sitting on the edge of a river. So just imagine a little river and a guy just sitting there. You know, he can't go home. He can't go anywhere else. So I just imagine a guy just sitting there, just contemplating life. I mean, I'm only imagining here. Nobody's just told me this. And, you know, why do we look at water? It's sometimes just kind of, it moves. It's just like we look at fire or a baby. Mm-hmm. You know, we're just thinking, we're meditating, we have nothing else to do, so we look at that because it's got some movement. So I'm just thinking he's just thinking about life, because it says it's that year he was going to be 30 years old. Now, he was born in a home where there were priests. So he was training to be a priest. And so in that year in Jerusalem, he would have been installed to be a priest. Now he's in Babylon. There's no temples. No need to be a priest if you're in a place where there's no temples. You cannot become a priest until you're 30. So my mind goes to Jesus and thinks, is that why Jesus didn't start his ministry until he was 30? Because, I mean, he was a grown man at 21. Why didn't he start anything until 21? He could have had 13 years of ministry. So, I mean, nobody's ever really said and talked about why he didn't start. But now this kind of makes sense. Not that Jesus was a priest, but I don't know, it makes sense to me. This is just Nancyology. But that, he was doing his ministry, so he is kind of doing priestly things. And so I'm thinking that's why he didn't really start his ministry till he was 30. So Ezekiel, he kind of is, there are people that are visual people. They see things just in pictures. I'm like that. Some people have photographic memories. Some people just see things. Like if you tell me a hymn, I can see that hymn on the page. I can still see it from the hymns I grew up with. So I can tell you what key it's in, and so I can go to the piano and play it because I remember that. Some people remember things other ways. And so I just think that Ezekiel is a visual person. And we're going to see throughout this book that that's the way he even talks to people, is through visual things, because that's how he learns. So I think we teach the way we learn. So that's probably why I like a board like this, because I like to see things. So I want to, I think if I'm gonna learn that way, you're gonna want to learn that way, though that isn't always the way it is. So all of a sudden, Ezekiel gets this vision as he's sitting there by this river. Now, he didn't have a late night pizza. It was God who gave him a vision. So he, in verse 4, he says, I looked. I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by a brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance, their form was that of a man, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and their feet were like those of a calf and gleamed like burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their 4 sides, they had the hands of a man. All 4 of them had faces and wings, and their wings touched one another. Each one went straight ahead. They did not turn as they moved. Their faces looked like this. Each of the 4 had the face of a man. And on the right side of their face was a lion. And on the left side of their face was an ox. And each had the face of an eagle. And each of their faces, there were, such were their faces. Their wings were spread out upward. So God has he does not have our minds. We do not have his mind. He has got a mind we can't even picture. I have seen one drawing, but it was on the internet, so I couldn't take a picture of it to show you this, what this was. But I want you to think of that faces of those creatures. It had a face of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. So when I went back to our Numbers, when we were in the book of Numbers, I talked about this, and I even said, now in Ezekiel, we're going to see this played out. Do you remember when we did all of these, I'll put this so I can have it in, even though it's always backwards, because I'm not smart enough to know how to change with that. The temple was here when they were at the bottom of Mount Sinai. And so these are the tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. And God said, I want you to break them up into 4s and then into 3. So Judah, Reuben, Dan, and Ephraim. And they had banners. And the banners were of these, each one had a different banner. But look at, Judah's was the lion. The eagles Dan had. Ephraim had the ox. And Reuben had the man. God, he just does this stuff. You're going to see this in Revelation too. I mean, he just weaves things throughout all of life and through the Bible. And as you go through and you see this stuff, you're going to be like, whoa, this is so cool. And I didn't write it down, but I know that they even say the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, John, are the same way. That the lion, that Matthew is the lion, and that the eagle is John. Do you remember, is Reuben and Ephraim, do you remember which one is Luke and which one is Mark? One of those is the ox and one is the man. So, and I can't, because one is the kingdom and...
The servant is that Mark? Which would be the ox. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so because when you look at...
Mark is the ox.
Mark is the ox, so that would make Reuben.
John.
No, John is the eagle.
Luke.
Yep. Luke would be the man. So when you look at the Gospels, Matthew looks at Jesus through a different light. Mark looks through him as a different light. So that's where we're getting this from, okay? So, all right, so now back to this vision. So inside this cloud are 4 strange creatures that have 4 outstretched arms touching each other. Now, if you really go back and remember the top of the Ark of the Covenant, on top there's wings that touch each other. Those cherubims on top of the Ark of the Covenant, there's wings that touch each other. And so the wings of this creature were supporting this dazzling platform. So there's a lot of words. There's lots of verses that talk about this. I'm just going to break it down. And on that dazzling platform is a throne. And sitting on that throne is a human-like creature glowing and shrouded in fire. And then all of a sudden, Ezekiel realizes what he's seeing. And look at verse 28. He says this in verse 28, and right in the middle of 28. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell face down and I heard the voice of one speaking. So he realizes the likeness of the glory of the Lord, and it's God riding his royal throne chariot. Now the word glory, in Hebrew, it's called kavod, K-A-V-O-D. It means heavy or significant. So in this, God speaks, a voice. Now remember, this is a vision. And God now speaks to him from that throne. And so in this first section of the book, opens to explore that question as Ezekiel begins to accuse Israel of their rebellion. Haven't we heard this before? Mm-hmm. Through every book of the prophets. I mean, this is like ding, ding, ding. We keep hearing the same thing over and over again. How many men does God have to bring to these people? So God first speaks to Israel from the throne chariot, and he commissions him as a prophet. This is the point. Remember, he thinks should have been a priest, but now God is now commissioning him to be a prophet. So Ezekiel is to accuse Israel of breaking their covenant. What's another word for a covenant? Promise, thank you. Their promise agreement with God in a couple of ways. And we've said them so many times. Can you name me just in your own words, what were some of the ways they broke their covenant with God?
I had that wrote down.
Just in any way you kind of think. What did they keep doing?
They brought in idols.
Yeah.
Brought in idols, they were worshiping idols, yep.
Sex with each other.
And anything they could get a hold of, right?
Yeah. They were promiscuous.
Yep, always giving their alliance to other gods. A big one, not that I really touched on this forever because I don't know why I didn't, but social injustice. That was such a big thing that God was ticked off about that their social injustice was huge to them. I think that God didn't like when, socially they were not, he didn't go into specifics always, but when they were having social injustice, he didn't like that. And their violence, okay? So as a result, God appoints Ezekiel to warn the people. And so he's already been warning him that, other nations are going to come and are going to take you over. Now, he has told them over and over, you're going to get scattered, okay? If you keep doing this, I'm going to scatter you all over. And we're going to hear something very interesting at the very end. But I'm going to scatter you, and I already split you. You already are split, okay? You were supposed to be one country. You already are split now, and this country is gone, and Judah, you're on your way out, okay? So now Ezekiel starts to use his idea of getting his message across by using action. Now, I just went to New York City, and we had the privilege of going to a Broadway show. So that was just the most fun. Now, we didn't have acts. Usually when you go to any kind of a show, you'll have Act 1 and Act 2. And now I never saw, it was not the hugest stage, but what they could do on one stage was unbelievable. Like they had two cars. One car was stationary, but they used it as a bed. Okay, so at some points in it, they would throw a blanket on the hood, and that was the bed, and the bedroom. And at other times, they were driving it. One time, they put the hood up and made a concession stand out of it. And you're like, I can't believe the entrepreneur, but the city is full of entrepreneurism. Okay, so now let me digress. We go to the Statue of Liberty, and so when you're walking to go on the ferry boat, first of all, you see the blankets all out with the guys and girls selling hats and memorabilia and the foam Statue of Liberty crown and all this stuff. And so when we get over there, we had a beautiful time over there, and then we took the ferry over to the Ellis Island. Well, while we were at Ellis Island, it started raining. And so then it was raining when we came back, and I thought of all those little people with their hats and all this stuff. I'm like, oh, they can't sell, because I wanted to get a few more hats. And so we get off the boat. Oh, those little entrepreneurs. They were all packed up. What were they selling? Ponchos and umbrellas. I mean, they don't miss a beat. They don't miss a beat. So what do we buy? Ponchos. So anyway, I'm going to tell you about 6 acts. Acts. So we're going to Act 1, okay? So Act 1 that we see Ezekiel doing. Look at chapter 3, verse 22 to 27. So he is going to use things that are props or just different things to try to get his message across. Because God already says they're not going to listen to you, okay? Same as Isaiah, same as Jeremiah, that they're not going to listen, but I want you to tell them anyway. I don't, I just don't want these people coming back and saying, you never told me. So 3:22 to 27. He says, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he said to me, get up and go out to the plain, and there I will speak to you. So I got up and went out to the plain, and the glory of the Lord was standing there, like the glory I had seen by the Kebar River. And I fell face down. Then the Spirit came unto me and raised me to my feet. He spoke to me and said, go shut yourself inside your house, and you, son of man, they will tie with ropes. So, Act 1 is the tied up. Okay? And so, tie with ropes, you will be bound so that you cannot go out among the people. I will make your tongue stick to the roof of your mouth. So evidently he had peanut butter. So that you will be silent and unable to rebuke them, though they are a rebellious house. But when I speak to you, I will open your mouth, and you shall say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Whoever will listen, let him listen, and whoever will refuse, let him refuse, for they are a rebellious house. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes I'm like, well, okay, I don't know how that'll help, but I'm not God, you know? And so if God says that's what I want you to do, that's what you'll do. So that's what he did. All right, so Act 2. Now, imagine this. I would think that any guy would love this one. We're going to call it Siege and Army. Okay, Army Men. He was told to go play in the dirt. This is in 4:1 through 3. He was supposed to build a tiny model of Jerusalem and then stage an attack on it. Okay, so I'm not going to necessarily read it, but he's supposed to like play in the dirt and just picture your kids or your. I love to play Army Men. I played in trucks for me. I did that just as much as Barbie dolls, but it was just supposed to just be a model of Jerusalem and stage an attack on it. So they were supposed to picture that there's going to be an attack on it. It was all in the dirt, okay? So probably his wife was like, what are you doing playing in the dirt, you know? Okay, so that's Act 2. Act 3. Now, we don't know how long it took him, you know, how many, if this was a long time in between, but, okay, now they start to get a little weirder, okay? This is 4 through 8. This one I'll read a little bit of. Lie on your left side and put the sin of the house of Israel upon yourself. You are to bear their sin for the number of days you lie on your side. I have assigned you the same number of days as the years for their sin. So for 390 days, you will bear the sin of the house of Israel. So we're going to call this lie down. So what he had to do was he had to lie on his right side. Now I would say that he laid on his, was it right side? Did I say that right? Left side. Okay, that makes sense. So he's in Babylon. He's laying on his left side, and I think it's because he has to face northern Israel. Because it was for 390 days that they, I don't remember what, for their years of their sin. That for 390 years that they sinned. That was why. After you finish this, lie down again, this time on your right side, and bear the sin of the house of Judah. So you had to face the other way and face towards Judah. I've assigned you 40 days, a day for each of their years. Turn your face toward the siege of Jerusalem, and with bared arm prophecy against her. I will tie you up with ropes so that you cannot turn from one side to the other until you have finished the days of your siege. Okay, you're like, okay, this is weird. And it is weird. That's why there's no sermons on it. How do you bring any application to that? Okay, so now we are on Act 4. Let me write down. Lie down. Okay. Act 4 is diet. It's a meager diet. This is in 4, 9 through 11. Take wheat and barley, beans and lentils, millet and spelt, put them in a storage jar and use them to make bread for yourself. You are to eat it during the 390 days you lie on your side. Weigh out 20 shekels of food to eat each day and eat it at set times. Also measure out 1/6 of a hin of water and drink it at set times. Now that is a very little amount, okay, that we don't understand shekels and we don't understand hin. But that was, people were supposed to look at that and see how little he ate, okay? And then in 12, Act 5, okay, this is another funny one.
It says 8 ounces.
Oh, okay, you've got one? Okay, yeah, 8 ounces, that's a cup.
And a hin is 2 2/3 cup. 2/3 quart.
Okay, and now that was the drink, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, he had more, Liz had a little more to drink. People need something to drink, so. Yeah, I guess I could have looked down at my.
The little bitty print that you're making me read.
Oh. And then, so now with that food, read on. How is he supposed to cook it? Can anybody? How is he supposed to read that? That is Act 5. Can anybody read it and tell me how he was supposed to read it and eat it?
Human would be cow.
Yeah, human dung for fuel.
His own poop.
Yep.
He was supposed to cook it over. But look at on where is it? Okay, so he says, see what in the days when Leviticus was written, remember Leviticus, we talk a lot about you can do this and do it this way, don't do it this way, you can eat this, you can't eat that, okay? So that is defiling yourself to eat food over poop, okay? Your own poop, or your brother's poop, or somebody's poop, okay? And I'm using the word poop because it just sounds so much worse, okay? So we gotta make this, I want you to feel this, okay? So I'm making it sound worse. I could make it sound lovely, but we're not going to. Okay, so, but Ezekiel comes back to God and he says in 14, oh, but let's go back to why God's saying this. He says, 13, in this way the people of Israel will eat defiled food among the nations where I will drive them. He's going to drive them out, okay? Because I want you to keep remembering this. He's going to drive them out. And then Ezekiel says, not so, sovereign Lord. I have never defiled myself. From my youth until now, I have never eaten anything found dead or torn by wild animals. No unclean meat has ever entered my mouth. So he's saying, God, how can you ask me to do something when I have never done anything to defile my body, and now you're going to ask me to defile myself? I don't think this is fair, God. And God says, maybe you're right. Okay. All right, I'll let you use cow dung. So now we'll come in here and we'll say cow dung. Okay, because God changed his mind. So sometimes we can change God's mind. Now, I don't always know if it's God testing us, but I don't think God was testing him here. So I think sometimes we can change God's mind. Now, Act 6 was a haircut. Okay, so I'm going to say that in this time this was all, okay, remember this was 390 days plus 40. Okay, so we're talking over a year. This is his beard and his hair, okay? Now, I know he wasn't old, but he couldn't take a shower. I'm pretty grossed out about a guy's long hair and beard. That just is kind of, to me. So, he's supposed to shave his hair and shave his beard. But what's he supposed to do with it? He is supposed to, let's look at it. This is 5, 1 through 4. Now, son of man, take a sharp sword and use it as a barber's razor to shave your head and your beard, and then take a set of scales and divide up your hair. Now, you know it had to be a lot of hair. Hair doesn't weigh that much to be able to put it on a scale. Would you agree?
He must have real thick hair.
He had thick hair. Or a lot. When the days of your siege come to an end, burn a third of your hair with fire inside the city. Have you ever smelled the burning hair?
Yeah, it smells awful.
It smells awful. So I guarantee he got the people's attention with burning hair. Okay. Now take a third and strike it with a sword all around the city. Now sounds like a weird person taking a sword and around the city with that hair. For I will pursue them with drawn sword. So if people ask them, what are you doing? He can say, this is what God is going to do. He's going to pursue you with a drawn sword. 3, but take a few strands of hair and tuck them away in the folds of your garment. Again, take a few of these and throw them into the fire and burn them up. So he was supposed to, I can see him taking them and just flinging them around the city. And I don't want to be in a guy's way with flinging yucky hair, flying and hitting me. And that just, So this is his acts. There was 6 acts of, things that he did to show what God was, it was his show and tell, okay, of what God was going to do. Instead of maybe saying it, this was his way of getting his message across. So he had 6 acts and he has 4 visions. We've already talked about the first vision. Now in chapters 9 and 10, we have vision number 2. And so it dismayed Ezekiel, I'm going to get those 2 names mixed up. He begins to perform his task, and after about a year, he has another vision. This one is about the temple. He goes on this virtual tour of the temple, and he sees what's happening there in his absence. Now, I read some writers that said they really believe that God picked him up and took him back to Jerusalem to show him what's happening in the temple back in Jerusalem. Some just thinks that it was a visual. You can choose whatever you think is more interesting to you. But what he sees in his absence is not good. In the outer court, in front of the temple, he sees this large idol statue, and there he sees the elders of Israel worshiping other gods, both inside and outside. He sees the women of Israel, and they're worshiping a Babylonian god named Tammuz. So how does a Babylonian god get into the temple in Jerusalem? So, and the vision ends with God's glorious throne chariot moving up and away from the temple. It's leaving and it's going east. So here is Jerusalem, right here. East. Which way is east going? If it's going east, which way is it going? Where's it going?
Babylon.
Where?
Babylon?
Very good. Yes, going towards Babylon. So he's going towards where his people are. Okay? Because he says, I'm going to go where my people are. So in chapter 11 then, so 10 says, my heading says, the glory departs from the temple. So the glory, his presence has left the temple in Jerusalem. And so, remember, we're hitting the highlights. So just as you read this, then when you're reading these Old Testament things, you're really going to have to read it with a commentary next to you. That's how you really get, and you don't have to buy commentaries these days. You can just go with Google on your phone and just, Bible Hub is some of the good ones you can get, if you're like, I don't understand this, just Google something and it'll give you different people. So it's pretty hard to just understand this all on your own. So in 11, we come to see why and how God's glory appeared to Ezekiel there in Babylon. Israel idolatry and their covenant violations, it's become so blatant and so offensive that God has left his temple. But they've driven him away, and he consigns it to destruction. But God hasn't abandoned his people. Rather, he goes into exile with them. So see, when he goes east, he goes into exile with them. And we see that in 11, when you read 11. So at the end of this vision, in chapter 11, verse 6, God promises that he will return a remnant of Israel back to the land. And he'll transform them by removing their heart of stone and giving them a new heart of flesh, soft heart of flesh, so that they can love and truly follow their God after all. So this is a small glimmer of hope, and it's quickly submerged on the reality of the imminent destruction of what's coming ahead. But chapter 11 is a transition. It's a key transition. Helps us understand how the rest of the book has been designed. So the next 3 sections are all announcements of God's judgment. First on Israel, then on the nations around Israel, because the nations around don't get away scot-free. And then on Jerusalem itself. And after that, the conclusion is the hope that's coming. The hope of Israel, the hope for the nations, and then for all creation, meaning us. So I said that in, what was the year? 586, the city is destroyed. So we're going to jump all the way over to 33. Let me just see if there's any headings I'd like you to look at. False prophets condemned, idolaters condemned. There's a bunch of allegories where there's 2 eagles and a vine. Two adulterous sisters, the cooking pot, and Ezekiel's wife dies, but he's not allowed to mourn over her. You'll read that in 24. And then there's a big thing about, you ever heard of Gog and Magog? Does that ring any kind of a bell? Okay, that's where you'll find it. That's from in here, okay? Magog is the country of Turkey right now. And I want you to, just because I'm on it right now, turn to 38. I want you to just make some notes in your Bible. It's called the prophecy against Gog. So write in your Bible in chapter 38, verse 2, the land of Magog, that is Turkey today. And the prince of Meshish and Tubal, that's Russia, and the allies all around that area. And then down in 5, that is Persia, which is Iran. Cush and Put is North Africa. And in verse 6, that is Gomer is Armenia. And then Togarmah is Eastern Turkey. So as you read those, it's just kind of interesting to know what those places are today. Okay? I like knowing that stuff. You may not, but I always think it's interesting. I'm like, where's that today though? Mm-hmm. So, okay, so in chapter 33, this has got a short story where Elijah's met by a refugee who's just arrived from Jerusalem, and he gives him the report that the Babylon has attacked the city of Jerusalem, the city's fallen, and the temple was destroyed. So that's where it happens in Ezekiel 33. So the grim warnings have now become a reality. Ezekiel receives the report that the siege of Jerusalem is over because the city has fallen, the temple is destroyed. And it's the most horrendous catastrophe that's ever happened to Israel. And it's really raises the big questions of whether God is really done with Israel for good. But remember the end of chapter 11, God promised that there was still a future beyond the exile for Israel. So the rest of the book is designed to explore Israel's vision of hope for Israel, the nations, and then all of creation. The hope for Israel begins with God promising to raise up a new David. Who do you think the new David is? Go way in the future. 400, 500, 600 years. Who do you think the new David is?
Jesus.
Yep. Future Messianic King is Jesus. Yep. He's going to be the new kind of leader that Israel needed but never got. But he's going to come and transform, and he's really going to transform the world. And it's just like Moses promised at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. God says he's going to remove their hard hearts and send his spirit into his people. Because remember, then the Holy Spirit comes in the book of Acts. Vision number 3 is in chapter 37. The Valley of Dry Bones. Now how many have not heard of the Valley of Dry Bones? Everybody heard of the Valley of Dry Bones? Yes? Okay, let me just go over it a little bit. So the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me out of the spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, O sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded. And I was prophesying, and there was a noise, a rattling sound. And the bones came together, bone to bone, and I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them. But there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, son of man, and say to it, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe into these slain that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore, prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. O my people, I'm going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. There's a song. Every time I read this, there's a song out right now. Does this dry bones hear the word of the Lord? I think it's Rattle. You know this song, Rattle? I'm like, I know that. I want to start singing the song when I'm like, hear the word of the Lord. Okay, so this is a vision, but it's also not fully come to life yet. It's only part. This is the Jewish people right now, okay? I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to come and finish it at the end of this, okay? So, but let's go to the final 2 chapters of the book, which is, we're going to go to 38 to 39. This is the promise God's final defeat of the evil among the nations. Okay, this is him dealing with the nations. God is determined to finally defeat human evil that has ruined his world. But chapter 40, Ezekiel first gets this long, elaborate vision of a new temple and a new city. Now, we talked about this, but I'm going to go over it again. The millennial. The millennium. I always get those words mixed up because Daryl always says, you're saying the wrong word. Okay, so we are going to live and we're going to die. Or we're going to live and God's going to come back in the rapture. Either way. After that happens, we're going to reign for 1,000 years. That's called the millennium. Millennium, not the millennial. Millennium. 1,000-year reign, okay? This is this is all in Daniel and in Revelation, okay? So we as Christians are going to be here, and we get to live again for 1,000 years. This is before we go to heaven, okay? So in our eternity, in our eternal home in heaven, that we aren't there yet, okay? The judgment seat. Now remember, we are not judged. We are judged for the good we have done, okay? When we go and stand before God, we are judged for the good things. And He gives us crowns for the things that we have done for Him. That's the crowns we get to lay at His feet. We're not judged for anything bad we've done because those are under the blood. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
We do not, He says, I don't remember those. What? I don't remember those. I don't remember any of those that were under the blood. Okay? The great white judgment is for the sinners. We are not. If you've accepted Jesus and He has forgiven your sins, you don't have to worry about that. You are standing before God to get your rewards. You will get crowns, and He will wipe away your tears. And it's just, who knows what the tears will be. It's maybe from the things that maybe you could have done, who knows. But I don't think it's going to be sad necessarily. Maybe regrets, who knows. That's Nancyology again.
So during that 1,000 years, are people going to still be giving
Yes,
birth and
yes,
dying?
yeah. Birth, I know. I can't remember about dying. Do you remember?
I don't think, are you going to be alive for 1,000 years?
Yes, we will be alive because we're not, our bodies, it's not these bodies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Not these bodies. And because we'll already have been our new bodies. Well, I don't know about new bodies, but we'll either
And
have
spirit,
raptured.
Or like you'll just be a spirit sort of like thing, or
That's a good question.
soul,
Is this like
your
the-
soul.
Sorry.
Yeah, anybody can answer.
Is this like the tribulation?
No, because pre-trib,
Oh.
tribulation is 7 years. The tribulation is 3.5 years of good, and that we will learn in Daniel, because Daniel is when he talks about that. Tribulation is 3.5 years of good, and then 3.5 years of really bad. It's all in how you believe. Pre-trib means I'm going to go. Jesus is coming back before any of that happens. Mid-tribs means I'm going to stay here for the 3.5 years. Post-trib means I'm going through it all. Pan-trib means however it pans out. And I have come, I've been here, I've been there, and I'm like, it's like, what difference does it make? It's going to be what it's going to be, I'm not scared, whatever it is. God's going to take care of me wherever I am. If we have to go through it, it will be a very exciting time for a Christian. But that's the time then where you take the mark of the beast or you don't take the mark of the beast. Okay? That's the 666 number. All that happens in the tribulation. And that is, Daniel predicts this, and we'll be going over that next time.
So what is the 1,000 years?
1,000 years is the millennial. That is, I didn't come prepared to talk about that. Go ahead.
Okay,
Yep.
this again is just, I'm throwing this out lightly because I haven't done an in-depth.
Yeah,
study.
me either.
But we are at the end of the 7 years, which I believe is pre-trib. So we would, if you ever heard the marriage supper of the Lamb, there's a 7-year marriage supper of the Lamb. At the same time on earth, when they're going through the 7-year tribulation period, the church is in heaven going through the 7 years of the marriage supper.
Oh,
of
I've
the
never
Lamb.
heard that.
Never heard that?
Nope, never.
Okay, again,
I thought that was in heaven.
it
But-
isn't. The marriage supper of the Lamb is in
So the
heaven.
Christians
Okay.
are taken out of the world.
Yes, well, this
but
is what-
and the others are still left here, and
Yeah.
they still have a chance, though.
Yes, because how deep do you want to go in this? Do you want me to keep
Good. Yeah, go ahead.
There are 144 Jewish
Mm-hmm.
men who will be marked and will not be able to be killed during that time, who are going to go around. Is it proselyting when you're saying the gospel and getting people saved? They're proselytes? Yeah. Anyway, those
Being
100,
apostles?
yeah, same thing. Yeah, they will be on earth and they will be going around to get people saved. So yes, there still will be people that will be able to be saved during that tribulation period on earth. But if you become a Christian you are just cutting your head off.
Yeah, it'll be a really rough time.
It's
for
going to
you.
be a really hard time. You're going to know when you receive Christ that you're going to be hunted to be killed.
Yeah.
Okay? It's not going to be like we have it
Right.
now.
Mhm.
But then at the end of that 7-year period, we who are in heaven, right, will come back with Christ on white horses. And I don't know whether you take Revelation literal or not. I do, where it says we'll come back with him on white horses, okay? And at that time is what Sister Nancy was talking about, where people will be before the throne of judgment. And then my understanding is there will be the Jewish nation. Jesus came the first time to set up his earthly kingdom, right? To the Jewish kingdom, right? And they refused him. So at the end of the 7 years, he's going to come back on earth. That is when he's going to establish his earthly kingdom.
Right, and that's what this is all about, is the millennium temple. That's what we're, just to this end of Ezekiel, is the millennium, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because then at that time, the earthly kingdom that Jesus establishes with the Jewish nation.
Yes.
So it's the Jews that will be on the earth for 1,000 years, having babies.
Well, but we will too.
Well, I don't think that's where I'm not sure. Like I said, what I've heard it taught and I've not dug into, that we are actually in heaven and we will be able to come and go.
Oh, come and go.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But we,
See, I've never heard that.
I know. That's why
Yeah.
I said I haven't in depth studied it, but I have sat under a really
never
not
heard
Billy
that.
Brim. I don't know if you know Billy Brim.
I've heard the
anyway,
name.
yeah, she said the church we will be living in heaven, but we will be able to come and go.
Either way, it's a good place
It's
to
a good
be.
thing.
Either way, come or go sounds fun to me.
Yeah.
But that's interesting, because that's what this is vision 4 is all about, the millennial temple. Okay.
Yeah.
So this tour of this new temple is the Millennium Temple. Okay. So and then in that is those chapters 40 through the new temple area, 40, I don't know, do you have a,
I think it's clear on through the rest
yeah,
of the book.
except through 47 and 48, it is not there. But that is where, that's the fourth vision. And that is the tiny stream pouring out of the temple that people talk about. You will hear sermons about that. That Ezekiel sees this tiny stream pouring out of the temple, threshold, and steps, which is really the altar. And then it quickly becomes this raging river. It's a type of a Holy Spirit. And it flows out of the temple and the city into the desert and into one of the most desolate places on the planet Earth, which is the Dead Sea Valley. And then that river, it leaves behind a trail of trees and life. And then that Dead Sea gets transformed into a living sea that's teeming with plants and animals. And all of this imagery comes from the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapters 1 and 2. And what I take from that, though, is, well, how we can take that, I'm sure it's meaning millennial, but also for us is, how much do we want of God, okay? He says it can go, you can take it just to your ankles, or just to your knees, or to your waist, or be all the way in. And so that's how I just want to bring that up, that's how, I like to look at that imagery and say, I want to be all the way in, so my head's all the way in. I want all of God that He can be. Now, I want to go back to the Valley of Dry Bones and to what I find very interesting about Israel. 1911, how many of you had Encyclopedia Britannicas in your home? Yep. They used to have, Marissa, this is so interesting because we used to have to get a new encyclopedia book every year because it had to be updated because it had gone out of, so many things had happened. So This is the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. It said, the possibility that we can ever again recover the correct pronunciation of ancient Hebrew is as remote a possibility that a Jewish empire will ever again be established in the Middle East. See, what happened was May 14th, 1948, Israel became a state. Now, what have I kept saying? Pay attention to this. God says, I will scatter you. He scattered the people. Ever since then, ever since this time, he scattered them. What does this say? What years? 600 BC. He started scattering them. Okay. So I did a little hunting because I like statistics. Before 1948, before they became their state, there were 120,000 people living in Israel. Jews, I'm sorry. 2,000 Jews lived in Jerusalem. Then 1948 came. Well, between 48, I think I want to write this because you got to see it to understand it, to really enjoy this, because I'm visual. I'm going to make you be visual too. So in between 48 and 51, 1948 and 51, 700,000 Jews settled in Israel. 300,000 came from Asia and North Africa. Whoops. Africa. 270,000 came from Eastern Europe. Now, also I want you to remember, before 1948, in the 40s, there were 9 million Jews. What happened in the 40s?
The Holocaust.
The Holocaust. How many died?
6 million.
6 million Jews were murdered. That left 3 million left only, all over the world, okay? So, these people are like rabbits. Okay, so in 1950, they passed the law of return. It was a new law they made, which granted to all Jews the right to settle in Israel and to gain citizenship. That year, 50,000 were secretly flown in. In 51, 120,000 moved from Lebanon, Syria, and Egypt. Between 48 and 58, the population of Israel grew from 800,000 to the magic number of 2 million. Where have we heard 2 million over and over again? You remember when they were in the Mount Sinai and they went across there, it was always 2 million. Remember that? So we're back at the 2 million, okay? In 2024, they reached 10 million. Now, we're not talking all around the world. We're talking in Israel. This is in Israel. In 2024, there are 10 million, and in 2048, they expect to be 15 million living in Israel. They had been scattered, and God says, I'm going to bring you back. Now, let's go back to the Valley of Dry Bones. Valley of Dry Bones, remember he said, they were dry, they were skeletons, there was nothing but bones. And he put tendons on, and he grew skin, but there was no breath. That's where they're at right now. They have tendons, they have skin, but there's no breath. There's no Spirit of God in them. Not until that millennium. That's when the breath is going to come in. Okay? Do you understand what I'm saying? That's when that is when I feel that is going to be totally fulfilled when they come back and make God they're promised and build that covenant back with him, that's when it's going to be. That valley of dry bones is going to be come to truth.
So you think that's a rapture?
No,
You think that's when they're gonna see it?
well, I don't know. I hadn't thought about that. I just think that's the fruition of that valley of dry bones. Because right now we know you have some messianic Jews, but you have a lot of Jews that they don't want anything to do with with Jesus.
Right.
So I'm gonna go ahead and shut this off.